It all started about 6 years ago. It was a small thing, completely insignificant, but it grew to unbelievable proportions. It took over my life and actually brought it to an end. My wife Janet and I were in our 50s. The children were grown and on their own. The house was paid off. We lived in comfort and were happy. I was preparing for early retirement from my job in the aerospace industry, and we were looking forward to an easy semi-retirement. Janet was still a beauty, as far as I was concerned. She was the only girl I had ever been with, and I never pictured myself with anyone else. I never had wandering eyes, and I never even contemplated infidelity. I loved her with all my heart, and yet she was the one who planted that damn demon seed. A few times a week, we'd go out and socialize. Sometimes we had dinner with friends. Sometimes we drank and went to a show, and sometimes we danced. One of the nights we danced, we both drank very little, and within reason. Janet enjoyed the dancing more than I did and spent time on the floor with different men. It was all a lot of fun, and I didn't mind. I noticed that several men were putting their hands on Janet's butt while dancing, but she didn't seem to mind. She didn't remove their hands or make any movement to avoid them. It didn't bother me. It all looked like a lot of fun, and I was sure it wasn't going anywhere. After a few dances, I asked her for a slow dance. As we twirled around the floor, I put my hand on her back like her other partners had done. She roughly pushed my hand away. After a few minutes, I put my hand on her ass again. She grabbed it and moved it to her waist. I was puzzled. I stopped dancing and looked at her. Every guy in this place has put their hands on your ass tonight, and you haven't made any of them remove them. What's going on? When they touch me, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. The seed had been laid. I stopped dancing and just stared at her for a while. I turned and left her on the dance floor and then returned to my seat. She followed me but didn't say anything. That was the last time I danced with her. We sat in silence for the rest of the evening. We didn't dance with each other or anyone else. We didn't drink anymore. Finally, we just got up, left, and drove home. She knew I was upset. I kept waiting for her to say something, anything at all. I was hoping for an apology, an explanation, or a joke, but she didn't say anything. We went to bed without speaking. For the next 2 weeks, we spoke to each other only out of necessity. It was a cold, cold period. I didn't do anything to upset her except react to her comment. I think she was as disturbed by my reaction as I was by her words. Neither of us talked about it. I kept waiting and hoping that she would realize how much she had hurt me and make some effort to ease my pain, but it didn't work. I tried to erase her from my mind, but she kept coming back. She was my soulmate, my only love, and to her, I was annoying. I felt like there was a hole in my heart, and she refused to heal it. I did my best to forget about it. I told myself it was nothing, just a phrase thrown in passing, and it didn't matter. I also knew that something had to be done, or the seed would sprout and turn into a tree. Time passed slowly. I already knew there would be no explanation or apology from her. I knew it would never be discussed. If she regretted saying it, she would have said so. I could only assume she said it because she meant it, and she had no reason to retract her words or soften them in any way. The seed had sprouted. We started talking again, almost normally, but not quite. The kids would come into the house and notice that something was wrong. When they would bring it up, we would ignore it or brush it off with gas or GFA. We tried to get things back on track, but it wasn't happening. The sex was the worst part. Throughout our marriage, sex was never an issue. We seemed to be compatible in most areas, and if she had any complaints, I was unaware of them. She was still the most beautiful woman in the world to me, the only woman. When I finally decided it was time to try sex again, she was responsive as always. That was a good sign. We kissed for a while and enjoyed foreplay. The words echoed in my head. When they touch me, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. My erection faded. All I could do was roll over onto my side on the bed. I don't know what her reaction was, and it had never happened before in 28 years of marriage. I'd always gotten through it. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I was disappointed and angry at the same time. Why the hell did she have to plant that damn seed? Why did she have to say it and mean it? All she had to do was apologize or say something to soften the reproach, but nothing came from her. I was dying inside. Weeks turned into months. I felt like I was failing her every day. I was unrequited as a lover, as a husband. I was not good company. I still loved her more than anything, but I couldn't show her how much I cared for her. We didn't go to clubs or dances anymore. A few times we went out to dinners with friends, but I wasn't good company. The spark between us was fading and was soon to be gone forever. I wanted her to have more. She had many good years ahead of her, and I felt she should be able to enjoy them. I couldn't give her what she needed or deserved. She was becoming like her old self, and I knew I had to do something about it. I wasn't looking for anything for myself. I wasn't looking for a new companion. I wasn't looking for freedom. I didn't want release from my torment. All I wanted was to make things better for her. I was willing to sacrifice everything I had to accomplish that. Most importantly, I didn't want to do anything to annoy her. I didn't touch her anymore. I cried a lot. I took early retirement from my job. It was a nice check that went into the bank every month. Janet could live off it without poverty. Her house and car were paid for, utilities were paid at a reasonable rate, and I made sure she had health insurance. I contacted a divorce lawyer and gave her everything I owned. I kept only my clothes and an old pickup truck. I talked to the kids beforehand and tried my best to explain that I was releasing her, not punishing her. I insisted that everyone know that I wanted nothing for myself and that I had no personal motives other than her welfare. My son, Terry, would take care of the yard and car for her, and my daughter, Kate, would take care of everything else. That damn demon seed has grown into a tree and taken over my life. When they touch me, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. I found an apartment across town and got a job at a small kennel. It didn't pay much, but I had already figured out what I needed and could get by if I was careful. The only things I took from the house were my personal belongings and clothes. I gave Janet the divorce papers, and she looked at me and said nothing. I had no idea what was going on in her head. I'm sure she realized the agony she had caused me, the suffering she refused to alleviate. For almost 2 years, she denied me compassion over her harsh remark. I am sure she was thinking of nothing when she made that remark. Maybe she thought I was making a mountain out of a tiny hill. And maybe I was. In reality, I was making a tree from a seed that should never have been planted. I cried as I left the house. She didn't say a word. She didn't say a word for the rest of her life. Kate came to me in tears. Janet refused to speak at all. She was responsive and attentive, but she wouldn't speak. Kate took her to the doctor for a checkup. They found nothing wrong. I canceled the divorce suit. It didn't seem to make any sense. However, I didn't go back to the house. They said she looked depressed, but she had no symptoms that would cause her to lose her speech. She was refusing to speak of her own free will. Kate began to spend more time with her. Janet was able to take care of herself, but was losing interest in doing so. She wouldn't open the mail, and after several negotiations with the utilities, we had to put all bills on automatic payment. Her meals consisted mostly of cereal and milk. Kate tried to cook regular meals for her as often as possible, but she had her own household to take care of. Kate made sure she did her laundry and showered regularly. I hadn't imagined this could happen to Janet, and I felt worse now than I had before the divorce. I tried to make her feel better. I was trying to set her free so she wouldn't be left with an unimportant husband. I wanted her to enjoy the rest of her life. Now it seemed like she was punishing me. She was punishing me for what she had brought upon herself. I started to drink. When they touch me, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. The demonic tree was getting bigger and bigger. I hated that tree. Why had she planted that seed? Months turned into years. Janet was getting worse and worse. Terry and Kate eventually had to put her in a special facility that could take care of her needs. They tried to talk to me about it, but I usually wasn't sober enough to understand or care. I had been drinking in moderation all my life, and now in my golden years I had turned into a drunk. The knowledge that Janet was locked up had a sobering effect on me. But it was a long time before I was sober enough to go to the woman I loved. She was sitting in a small private room. She was neat and clean. She sat looking out the window. Nothing seemed to interest her. She was in a trance and didn't notice anything around her. The nurse said she did this every day. She would go to the dining room to eat, and the rest of the time, she would just sit and watch. She never spoke. She recognized me when I sat down next to her. She smiled slightly and held out her hand. I took it and cried. She was looking out the window, but she didn't let go of my hand. A tear ran down her cheek. My heart was crying out for her to say something, but she was silent. We sat like that for about an hour. I came back every day, but nothing changed. I insisted that they do more tests and checkups to make sure everything was okay. It wasn't. Her problem was emotional. I wanted to talk to her, but I never could. All we did was sit together and hold hands. I was afraid to say anything because I didn't want to annoy her. I was so glad she let me touch her. When I'm touched, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. It seemed like a contradiction, but I was able to accept it now. My touching was acceptable, but I was afraid to speak up. One day, Kate came in to pick me up at work. She was in tears. Janet had died. She passed away sitting in a chair, looking out the window. I insisted on an autopsy. They found nothing. The funeral was small. Kate and Terry offered to let me live with them, but I refused. I started drinking again. I quit my job and became a recluse. I began to understand Janet's desperation, but I could never understand why she did what she did. I tried over and over again to figure it out. Why did she never admit how much she had hurt me? Why did she find it necessary to punish me the way she did? Withdrawing into herself and isolating herself from the world. Was she truly hurt by what she said and couldn't bring herself to apologize because she loved me, or was she just mad at me for making a big deal out of it? When they touch me, it's arousing and pleasurable. When you touch me, it's annoying. The tree grew to its full height. The last thing I heard was the sound of an empty pill bottle falling to the floor.